Now, of course, here on the Big Five, it's always exciting to actually take the time and have a case study. And this one particularly, I'm really interested in. Europe's largest green facade, KÖ-BOGEN. So we're going to have a look at this. And it's going to be the founder of Ingenhoven Architects. This is a very special project. Christoph, Ingenhoven is going to join me right now. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Christoph, because we're very curious and very interested to see what this case study is all about.
Yeah, thank you very much for that very friendly introduction, Edna. I'm sitting in Germany. It's evening, so whatever time it is at your place, I appreciate the opportunity to present one of our recent projects to you. But before I do so, I would very much like to
Tim,
give you a small, short introduction into our thoughts. We are building in cities mainly, and you will see a project that is situated in a city. The world's population is expected to exceed to more than 9 billion in a relatively short term. And 50% of the people today are already living in cities, and it will be more than 70% in 2050. So the forecast is that cities are even more important than they were and there are today. 40% of the largest cities home less than 80% of the world population, but they're representing 66% of world economy, and they are all just covering like 3% of the planet's surface, whilst they are representing 80% of the CO2 emissions. So what can we say? We can say cities are our future. We need them, but we need better ones. If you look at that statistic here, you will see that Houston, Texas, for example, has a 50 times bigger footprint in oil consumption and a 50 times bigger footprint in land use per capita than Hong Kong, and a significant higher one than even Vienna, Paris, Copenhagen, and other cities. So you see that density of the city is directly, drastically representing the CO2 emission, and that higher density will translate directly into drastically reduced CO2 emissions. So we have to look for a better city model, and we have as well to look for a much better architecture and much better buildings in our cities. And I would like, in this frame, I would very much like to give you an idea about what we did in Düsseldorf, where in the city center, in the very middle of the city, as you see here, there is a project developed whose name is KÖ-BOGEN II. Originally, you see Düsseldorf has that kind of green lung in the middle of the city, and the long stripe, the north-south stripe in the middle is the so-called Königsallee, which is the classical high street in Düsseldorf. And that system of parks and water lakes and canals were in a way the heart of that city. The city was like built around it. And before the war, the situation was this. And after the war, after the destruction of the war, there was a kind of unreadability because parts of the building were like demolished. They were replaced by traffic. It was a very car-orientated politic. So we invented new kind of motorways, new alleys, new streets, parking facilities, a lot of things that made the originally beautiful, readable, orientatable, clear cityscape, and it turned it into something which was interrupted, very difficult to read, very difficult to experience, difficult to orientate. That's the situation before the war, and this is the situation like 10 years after the war. It's the same spatial situation. I think it's impressive to see how much it has changed, and how much it has changed into an open space which was near to unreadable, near to not experienceable. At the end of that high street that I showed you, that was the situation. There was an underground passage between the high street and the park. There was that raised street, the bridge crossing and cutting the city into two. A lot of unsatisfying situations around. You see, that's an absolute city center. So it's a depressing situation in a way. And when I was a little younger, like in '93, I was walking the city with my kids, and I had the impression that we had to do something. And I suggested the city mayor to change the whole inner of the city. It took us more than 20 years to come to this point in time that you see here, where that raised kind of motorway was destroyed, demolished. And the people experience this kind of view to the high rise that is called the Dreischeibenhaus. It's a very famous building from the 60s, and the city theater, the white building in the back. And the people simply didn't want to lose this perspective anymore. So before it came to that, we had a lot of thoughts, plannings, a lot of ideas what we could change. And as you see here in the middle of the situation, we position two buildings on top of the no longer existing traffic streetscape. We replaced the above ground traffic by underground tunnel system, and proposed to position two buildings on top of it instead of the traffic. So at the end, it would have looked like this. And then by demolishing the bridge and the above ground traffic and replace it by a tunnel, the park could be an ongoing one. So above ground, the view to the same situation, and then how we wanted to change it by one time building these tunnels, and the other part of it was building the above ground building. And then later, on basis of that plan, Daniel Liebeskind, one of our colleagues, built this building that was not exactly our architecture, but it was the position, the volume that we have foreseen. And in the foreground, you see that ongoing new park that was a reunification of the two separated parts of the park that has existed before. And you see in the middle that red building where the roof is red. You see that's the building positioned in exactly the same position that was foreseen in our plan. If you turn to the right from the red building, you see that there was the tunnel was under construction, and right from the tunnel you see that high rise that I mentioned before and the theater. And as you see here, the situation was unsolved. It was an open question how we would proceed with our plans and what would be the solution for this situation. So what I try to explain in this drawing is there is that kind of view corridor that should be kept open towards the theater, and we could position two buildings on top of it, one smaller one bigger one, and we finally decided to have a very small, very flat one on the left side and a very, very big one on the right side. And as you see here, it would come to a complete green building and a complete a surface on the roof and on the two facades, which is completely covered by hedges. So the suggestion was to keep this axis open and to make the two buildings more visible. We decided to put sloping facades as well to the right, to the bigger building, and the very, very slightly sloping roof on top of the smaller left building. And so the illustration shows how that would work, how it would look like in architectural terms. And then coming up, you see that these clear axes that I see approach the accessibility of the theater, and as well the visibility of the high rise would be much better. And we tried to reposition in a way these two buildings and create a much better relation to the city center. It was important to make sure that the surface of the buildings covered by that hedges is in a good condition and visually attractive all year through. So it was also important to have plants that keep the leaves during the whole winter. We made sure that this is the case. You see, in winter it should look like this. And then coming back to the whole situation, you see how that all works together. Sitting on that sloping green roof, you would have the view to the central plaza. In the middle, left the theater, right the shopping center. And then you see here that axis, which is called a valley between these two sloping facades and sloping architectural forms. There's a theme of a green roof. As I mentioned before, the smaller building has a lawn on top of it, and the bigger building, these more than 8 kilometers, 30,000 plants, single individual plants of hedges. And then you see here that sloping thing where the people can sit on and enjoy themselves and have a kind of look towards the plaza, kind of theater-like shape. You see there's a lot of technique needed for making sure that this lawn is usable all year through. And then you see the section through that shopping building, sloping facade, upper floors with windows for the offices, kind of basic under construction, and then on top of that the planters, and then on top of the planters the hedges, like on that steep sloping facade, and then exposed to sun and as well to rain. So it's well served by the natural conditions and circumstances, fully exposed to the sun, and provides a very good condition for the well-being of the plant. Different irrigation systems, it's a very different temperature on top of this building, because partly on the roof it's fully exposed to the full range of sun, And then at the two sides, it's very differently. One is to the north, one is to the west. You can imagine very different temperatures in summer and winter. If the sun is out, if the cloudy weather, and so on. So we had to make sure that within every of these conditions, the plants would be okay and feel well. A lot of thinking about how to maintain it. We had to make sure that there are ladders and small moving or movable parts where you can stand on and cut the hedges and serve the hedges and make sure that it all works. It is we have sprinklers like irrigation system. We have as well kind of sewing for getting the extra water, getting it away from the plants. Make sure that they're not too wet. Everything has to be like checked. We checked that how toxic special plants are. We made a lot of effort to select the right trees. It came to the point where we could decide about what it is, and then finally we bought these 30,000 plants. You will see that in a minute. So there's a lot of checking and a lot of advantages, disadvantages that we try to balance. And I don't want to bother you with everything what we did in that respect, but it was a lot of work, and I think it was done with a lot of care. So this is the leaf during summer, and this is the leaf during winter. So they're keeping the leaves until like April, and when the new leaves are coming in springtime, just a week or so before they get rid of the old leaves, and then for 1 week it's without, and then the new leaves are coming, and it's quite a very green and beautiful new life. We made mock-ups like this one, where we try to find out how the growth is over a certain time frame, how the roots will be developed, and made sure that the volume of soil and the kind of irrigation and the height and the volume of the trees and of the plants or the hedges are according to the possibilities and the abilities of the planters. And then we rented a big field on a farm in northern Germany, and we planted these small plants there, made them like grow over 3 seasons. During the winter, we checked that they are all leaf keepers. And finally, we cut them, we brought them into the planters already. And then I think there's a very impressive photo to see how many planters that were. So 3 years of caring, 3 years of checking, 3 years of visiting the site, see some of the people who were involved in it, cutting it 3-4 times a year, and everything that made it a successful situation. We had a lot of experts working together with us, people who are botanists, specialists for irrigation, people who knows everything about this special kind of plant, people who build it, people who provided us with that farmland in northern Germany to grow it. So a lot of people involved, very friendly, very helpful, a very nice team. And then finally we put it on site. You see one of the cranes that lifted the hedge elements on top of it. First springtime, when it was all green. And then you see the overall shape of it. It's an immense building. It's 30,000 square meter of floor plate. It's 8.3 kilometers of hedges, 30,000 plants. It's 3 complete sides of the elevations of the building. You see in the foreground the smaller lawn. You see some impressions, how it works in the city. It's a complete unknown kind of architecture. It's a completely new approach. It has all the advantages that a green building, a green roof has, like dust reduction, like reduction of heat islands. It lowers the temperature significantly in the surrounding areas of the city. It enhances biodiversity by providing places and opportunities for small animals, for birds and insects and beetles and whatever, butterflies, whatever you like. So it's a lot of advantages coming from that. It is, I think, meanwhile, a very beloved part of the city. It turned the whole situation really around into something very new. You see it works together with the buildings on the right side, that Miesian kind of high-rise. In the foreground, the theater works together with diagonally to the shopping building of Richard Meier. So it's a kind of ensemble, and this ensemble is working as a whole system. You see what we promised is more or less what the people got. And you see it as well here, that was the original drawing for the competition. And if you see today, I think it's impressive to see that it has been the same, and it's as promised. And if you look from that aerial view here, you can imagine how sophisticated these two buildings and the plaza in between tried to bring all these existing buildings and the new buildings into a new balance. And I think there's coming one more, and another aerial view where you can see all these green hedges and how that works together. And I hope you enjoyed my small presentation. And what is important for me is that we try with the buildings that we do, with every building that we do, to do our contribution to a new kind of city, to a city which is resilient, which is capable of coping with the future demand of cities in the situation of climate change. Thank you very much.
And what a wonderful story there, the story of KÖ-BOGEN II. Christoph Ingenhoven there, just really bringing us up to date with the great work that's been done there, and just so lovely to see, and so lovely to see all of these wonderful pictures. Martin Reuter joins us now. Of course, he is the Managing Director of Ingenhoven Architects. Martin, thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Good day to everybody.
It was just such a lovely journey Christoph brought us on there. And of course, he tells a great story too, even bringing himself back to his youth and his dissatisfaction with the way the city looked and all of that. But when you look at, how this all came about, talk to us in terms of this building, and talk to us what this building became, this complex of buildings, so to speak. And also, I believe you carried out, the building construction and the civil engineering at the same time. Was it unusual to do all that? But there was a whole project that gave formation to all at once. Very, very exciting project indeed.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is, and it's a quite complicated project. And if you look at the roots of that project, it started already in 1997. Yeah, and then we had a quite intense phase in 2003 where we explained the project idea with all the tunnels and getting rid of the traffic on top of the ground, during the MIPIM of 2003. And then it took a long way in order to get it organized with the city throughout many competitions. And KÖ-BOGEN II, as a final result, or the final little brick within this artwork of urban redevelopment was then done in the last 3 years. And we were the lucky guys winning a competition, a design competition with this beautiful entry. And if one is wondering about how we could convince somebody else to get all the green on top,
exactly, that's where we have a question in on that, indeed. And how did you actually manage to convince the client to do it this way?
Yeah, as I was trying to say, it wasn't that complicated because our competition entry was already showing the green. So since the city was involved in selling the site to potential investors, it became sort of a, how to say, not regulation, but an urban planning requirement to implement the green facade as it was shown during the competition. The real struggle, as one would like to call it, started then, because it was about organizing all of that or ensuring that what we had been showing during the competition is actually feasible, is working, and is working within the budget of the client as well.
Now, talk to me about the ecological value of this project. I mean, it's every picture, one looks better than the other. It looks beautiful from the air. It looks beautiful close up. But also, I mean, it serves, other purposes than just being a beautiful building.
Exactly. Yeah, green is beautiful. Green is always an aspect to the people that look at the building because somehow people are bound to nature. But within our cities, as we all know, we do face climatic issues like heat buildups. So one of the aspects would be that the green of this building and the amount of green is helping to enhance the microclimate around that building. So it's actually bringing the temperature right around the building down by 2 to 3 degrees in summer by evaporation. It's cleaning the air because it's dust binding. It's binding CO2, as we all would know. So it's doing quite a big job for the city, and it's doing the job the site potentially could have done if there was no building. So that's part of our, let's say, philosophy to not only occupy a site, but to bring the ecological value of the site back, or sometimes even more than the site could have done if it just was planted as green land or grassland.
Now, one of the things that Christoph actually said there was, that cities are our future, but we need better cities. And obviously, if we saw more buildings like this would probably, contribute to actually making our cities look better, feel better, help us live better within them. What do you, in extension to what he said there, what do you say?
I think he covered that pretty well already. Yeah, cities are the future simply because if we would further spread out with settlement, we would destroy the amount of earth which we actually need in order to ensure that we have enough food and land and forests in order to reduce CO2 and to produce O2. So the result can only be, or the solution can only be, that we improve in the cities and that we help to reduce CO2, the amount of CO2 which is getting spread out due to construction. So one way is to reduce it in construction itself, the decarbonization, as we say. So to be a bit more reasonable in terms of the materials we use and the process we have. However, adding green to the building is then a second, let's say, step into this idea, simply because the building is not only reacting anymore, it's acting. Yeah, it's positively impacting on the city because it's a living organism and not a dead granite wall, as an example, or metal. It's something that can do something for the city rather than just react on the outer conditions.
Now, obviously, this building is right in the city center, so it's going to command high rents in terms of the retail shopping area and the district that it is in. But when we look at additional costs to a building, to clad it in plants and to make it, as you call it, this active building, and also, to maintain it. You can't just put plants on the building and walk away. It's a project for life, really. It's not just cleaning the building. Talk to us a little bit about that in terms of the cost, and indeed also perhaps the water management, to keep this very beautiful green building green. We don't want it to turn brown.
Correct. However, we have seasons in Germany, and it's part of the building concept that it actually turns brown in autumn. So it's something you want, but you're talking about the plants drying out and dying. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning. It's always a big point. It's the main concern when we come up with green ideas for our buildings, and we do that on in many occasions. And we are currently building 3 others. Not quite like that, but similar. And the biggest concern of the client is always, what about maintenance? What about plants dying on the building? So we therefore undergo a quite rigorous process together with many involved engineers and specialists. Yeah. Specialists that know a lot about plants, specialists that know a lot about irrigation, engineers that know a lot about integrating the techniques of irrigation and planting and fertilization into facade design, and finally botanists giving us the right specimen and advising about those. You have to look at wind, you have to look at sun, exposure, the way, which kind of exposure you have, and how that could actually work for the particular plant you're providing. So having said that, eventually it does come down to actual cost for the first installation, so to say. And that's what one would have with a normal facade as well. So you could simply compare a normal glass facade or curtain wall facade or metal clad facade, granite facade with your green facade. This may turn out positive for the green facade, yeah, because the initial invest is not higher than the other one. However, it then comes down to maintenance. Whilst you would clean a fully glazed building 2 times a year, you have to cut those hedges potentially 3 times a year. The specialists are telling us now, after the first couple of months, it may end up having to trim the hedges 2 times a year. So it's pretty similar. Having said that, the last remaining point would be, what about fertilizers? What about water management? Yeah, what about energy that is getting spent over the lifetime of this green facade? Let me answer that by telling you that the biggest amount of water that we need to irrigate the plants is collected from the rainwater. So we can collect quite an extent of water and keep it. You have to build a big store, a big tank underneath. That's a bit of cost investment, but you can cover quite a bit of that. And if you have chosen the right plants, yeah, and those are able to withstand the climate, yeah. So it's we are not planting a palm tree in Düsseldorf. We are planting a hedge which is coming from that region here. This hedge can also deal with some drier months, yeah, in summer, and it also can deal with a hard winter. So it does not need a super special treatment. Nonetheless, there's an amount of remaining water you have to spend, but that's just the same with every tree in every park. So it's not different to that. And that would be my answer eventually. I would say,
yes,
if somebody finds it okay to plant a tree in the park, it's okay to have a hedge on the building.
Yeah, I mean, the drainage system, the ceiling system, all of that, you know, built into it as well. We only have a few minutes, and I know you have talked about this as your most expressive building. I have a question in here wondering if this type of operation would be possible in the Middle East, in terms of a building like this thriving. But also perhaps just very quickly, this one is your most expressive one. Would you attempt something like this in the Middle East, and what are the next buildings?
Oh, what are the next buildings? Yeah, there are a couple of buildings coming up, some high rises in Australia, which implement quite a bit of green as well, but more green technology. And does it work for Middle East? I'm afraid, as we are building solutions for the particular region, I would have to say it probably would need to be a different building. It can't be just the same, but it could deal with the same aspects, just with a different outcome.
Yes, and again, I'm probably different plants, and it's
exactly,
you know, different weather. It's all of that. And this type of weather here in December in Dubai and in the Middle East is very beautiful. So yes, if we had weather like this all year, but thankfully it gets a little warmer here as well. So listen, we have to leave it there. Martin, thank you so much, and a big thanks to Christoph. And you know, good luck with all your green buildings. They're really a joy to behold, and I hope we see more of them around the world.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.